In January of 2022, beloved comedian Bob Saget was found dead in his Orlando hotel room just hours after performing stand-up. The autopsy revealed massive skull fractures and brain bleeding, injuries more consistent with a serious car crash than a simple fall. Investigators ruled it an accident, likely from hitting his head, dismissing it as minor and going to sleep unaware of the fatal damage. Even more tragic, just that morning, Bob had posted on Instagram about the show he'd done the night before, writing, "I'm back in comedy like I was when I was 26. I guess I'm finding my new voice and loving every moment of it." With no drugs or alcohol in his system and no signs of foul play, his sudden death at 65 left fans across the world completely stunned. In February of 2023, two notorious orcas named Port and Starboard went on a killing spree off the coast of South Africa, slaughtering at least 17 seven-gill sharks in a single day. When the shark carcasses washed ashore, researchers were stunned to find that each had been sliced open with eerie precision. Every single liver was gone, while the rest of the body was left behind. Orcas are known to favor shark livers for their high fat content, but the surgical accuracy of these attacks has cemented their reputation as the ocean's most ruthless predators. Dennis Rader, the BTK killer, evaded capture for 30 years until his arrogance finally brought him down. In 2004, apparently desperate for attention, he sent police a floppy disk after asking if it could be traced and believed them when they said no. Investigators quickly pulled metadata pointing to a computer at Christ Lutheran Church under the name Dennis, exposing the church leader and family man as the sadistic murderer who had bound, tortured, and killed his victims while hiding in plain sight. In the mid-1980s, the Thorac-25 radiation machine became infamous as one of the deadliest medical devices ever built. Designed to treat cancer patients, it instead delivered massive radiation overdoses due to several hidden software flaws and missing safety checks. Between 1985 and 1987, at least 6 patients were blasted with hundreds of times the intended dose, burning their flesh from the inside out, leaving some screaming in agony, and ultimately causing several horrific deaths. Rampage Jackson has said that his son Raja was never the same after his mother was murdered, a little-known tragedy in their family history. The details of her death aren't publicly known, but this revelation resurfaced after Raja's violent outbursts at the Knox Pro Wrestling event, where he struck wrestler Psycho Stu with more than 20 unanswered blows, leaving the man critically injured. Rampage condemned the attack, but also pointed to the loss of Raja's mother as a turning point in his life, which may begin to explain the troubled path that led to this shocking incident. This is what a bear with rabies looks like. The good news is, the bear will most likely kill you before the rabies becomes an issue. In 2012, 2 young sisters from Tacoma, Washington suffered such severe sunburns during a school field day that they had to be rushed to the hospital. Shockingly, the burns could have easily been prevented, but the girls weren't allowed to use sunscreen because school policy required a doctor's note, treating it like a controlled drug. The incident caused outrage, and years later, Washington finally passed a law allowing students to carry sunscreen at school without medical permission. With the Powerball approaching $2 billion, let's take a look at why winning the lottery can actually ruin your life. In 2006, Florida truck driver Abraham Shakespeare struck it rich with a $30 million lottery win, but the fortune quickly drew endless requests for money from family and friends who were clearly taking advantage of him. By 2009, he had mysteriously vanished, and months later, his body was found buried beneath a concrete slab. Investigators later revealed that Dee Dee Moore, who had befriended him under the guise of helping manage his wealth, had instead stolen his money and orchestrated his murder. In 1999, a Florida waitress was tipped a lottery ticket and won $10 million from it. She was then sued by her colleagues for their share before being sued by the man who tipped her the ticket. That same week, she was kidnapped by her ex-husband and ended up shooting him in the chest when he threatened to kill her. She then spent the next 10 years fighting a legal battle against the IRS, which she eventually won. In 1978, psychologists performed a study to compare the happiness levels of lottery winners versus accident victims who suddenly became paraplegic. The study found that over time, the everyday happiness of lottery winners ended up being lower than the happiness of accident victims. Wendell Middlebrooks, the actor who played Kirby on The Sweet Life on Deck, died suddenly at the young age of 36 when a pulmonary embolism tore through his lungs. He was found unconscious and alone in his Los Angeles home, likely collapsing in seconds as the blood clot blocked his oxygen, leaving him with no chance to call for help. Fans remembered him as the goofy security guard and the straight-faced Miller High Life guy, making it all the more tragic that such a wholesome presence was suddenly struck down by a silent killer lurking in his bloodstream. Some people known as bug chasers deliberately try to infect themselves with STDs, most notoriously HIV. Emerging in the late 90s, the subculture revolved around men seeking unprotected intercourse with HIV-positive gift givers. For some, the virus was fetishized as a form of erotic gift, while for others it was seen as inevitable, something to get over with instead of living in fear of. Some even viewed HIV as a mark of belonging to a special community. Interviews revealed participants craving the taboo of a slow, deadly virus invading their body, an act of self-destruction that got them aroused. Here are some morbid facts about Ozzy Osbourne. During a January concert in 1982, Ozzy bit the head off of a bat that was thrown on stage. Ozzy claims he thought it was rubber, but it was actually a live bat that forced him to be treated for rabies. One night in 1989, at the height of his drug addiction, Ozzy randomly told his wife Sharon, "We've come to a decision that you have to die." He then lunged at her and began choking her before Sharon managed to press the panic button under her table, and the next thing she knew, Ozzy was gone and the cops had arrived. She was later quoted saying, "I had no idea who was sat across me on the sofa, but it wasn't my husband. He goes to a state where he gets a look in his eyes where his shutters are down, and I couldn't get through to him." Ozzy said he had no recollection of the event, and Sharon dropped all charges. After an ATV accident in 2003, Ozzy stopped breathing and was technically dead for about 2 minutes before being revived. The crash left him with a broken collarbone, ribs, and neck vertebrae, and his heart reportedly stopped during surgery. Between this incident, several tour accidents, drug-induced seizures, falls, and multiple surgeries, Ozzy now has permanent nerve damage and a metal rod in his spine. He's admitted that even just standing up without help is a massive struggle. In 1982, while wearing his wife Sharon's dress during a photo shoot near the Texas Alamo, Ozzy drunkenly urinated at a memorial erected in honor of those who died at the famous battle. Ozzy was arrested and ended up being banned from the city of San Antonio for a decade. While on tour with Motley Crue in 1984, Ozzy asked Nikki Sixx for a line of cocaine. Upon being told there was none left, Ozzy grabbed a straw and proceeded to snort some ants off the ground. Nikki later confessed, "From that moment on, we knew there was always someone who was sicker and more disgusting than we were." During a drug-fueled breakdown, Ozzy once shot all of his family's cats and then sat under a piano for hours with a knife and a shotgun, waiting for Sharon to come home. He later described it as the lowest point of his addiction and the moment he realized he had completely lost control. In the early 1980s, Ozzy hired a performer named John Edward Allen, a dwarf actor who appeared in Blade Runner, and nicknamed him Ronnie to mock rival singer Ronnie James Dio. As part of Ozzy's live shows, Allen was theatrically hung from a noose on stage every night during the Diary of a Madman tour. Allen struggled with alcoholism throughout his life and died from a drug overdose in 1999 at the age of 50. In 2010, Ozzy had his genome sequenced to determine how it was possible for him to still be alive after so many years of abusing his body. Researchers found mutations related to addiction, metabolism, and Ozzy's Neanderthal ancestors. In fact, he carries several 100,000 genetic variants that had never been seen before by scientists. Meaning if Ozzy wasn't a literal mutant, he likely would have died decades ago, but is still breathing at the ripe age of 76. In 1993, a Mexican zoo official was arrested in Miami after trying to illegally purchase a live gorilla, only to discover the animal was actually an undercover agent in a gorilla suit. The operation was part of a federal wildlife trafficking bust and led to one of the most ridiculous arrests in American history. As a child in the Philippines, boxing legend Manny Pacquiao ran away from home after witnessing a horrifying act. His father, drunk and enraged, killed and ate the family's pet dog. Devastated, Pacquiao fled and began living on the streets, sleeping in a cardboard box and surviving by selling donuts and scraps. The trauma of watching that happen to his beloved pet pushed him into a life of brutal survival at just 12 years old, an early glimpse of the hardship and violence that would define his relentless drive in the ring. Justin Roiland, the original voice of Rick and Morty, saw his career collapse after a wave of disturbing allegations. In 2020, he was charged with felony domestic battery and false imprisonment. And though the case was dismissed in 2023 for a lack of evidence, Adult Swim, Hulu, and his own gaming studio had already severed ties. That same year, new accusations surfaced of sexual assault, inappropriate contact with underage girls, and toxic workplace behavior, including lewd messages to colleagues. Once the celebrated co-creator of Rick and Morty, Roiland's reputation is now defined by scandal, and with seasons 7 and 8 already recast, the show has clearly moved on without him, with no indication that he'll ever return. Here's a photo of two tourists posing inside the Claw of Death at Chernobyl, a massive crane used to scoop up chunks of radioactive reactor core after the 1986 meltdown. The machine is still so contaminated that standing near it can deliver radiation doses dozens of times higher than a chest X-ray, and its rusted frame is coated in radioactive dust that can cling to hair, skin, or clothing. While a brief picture likely won't cause immediate sickness, the exposure adds to long-term cancer risk, and any contamination they brought home could be far deadlier. It remains one of the most dangerously toxic relics of the exclusion zone, yet people still climb inside it for a photo op. In 2000, a Tahitian man named Fidel Maruhi pulled off one of the most unlikely survivals in aviation history. He stowed away in the wheel well of a Boeing 747 bound for Los Angeles. For 7.5 hours, he endured sub-zero temperatures and near total lack of oxygen, and when rescuers found him, his core body temperature was just 79 degrees Fahrenheit, a level usually considered fatal. But against all odds, he lived, and when asked why he'd risk such a death-defying stunt, he explained his dream was to reach France simply so he could shake hands with soccer legend Zinedine Zidane. The crimes of Gary Heidnik were so horrific they inspired the character Buffalo Bill in The Silence of the Lambs. In 1986, Gary turned his Philadelphia home into a dungeon of unspeakable horrors. He abducted 6 women, chaining them in his basement pit where they endured beatings, sexual assault, starvation, and even being forced to torture each other. 2 women were killed during the ordeal, and in one of the most grotesque acts, Heidnik dismembered a victim, ground up parts of her body, and fed it to the other prisoners. While he carried out these atrocities below ground, he held church services upstairs as if nothing were wrong. Heidnik's twisted plan, according to his lawyer, was to impregnate multiple women in hopes of creating what he called a perfect race. His crimes came to light in 1987 when one captive escaped and alerted police. Heidnik was sentenced to death and executed by lethal injection in 1999, becoming the last person ever put to death in the state of Pennsylvania. Tom Cruise once sued a gay adult star for $10 million after the man claimed they had an affair. The actor Chad Slater eventually admitted he made the whole thing up and defaulted on the lawsuit, owing Cruise millions he'd never pay. Cruise has also sued multiple publications over similar claims about his sexuality, aggressively shutting down rumors for decades. In 2009, a California woman sued the makers of Captain Crunch, claiming she'd been misled into believing that Crunch berries were real fruit. After eating the cereal for 4 years, she discovered they were just brightly colored cornballs and accused the company of false advertising. The court quickly dismissed the case, ruling that no reasonable consumer would think Crunch berries were real, especially since no such fruit exists. A man who was struck and killed by a metro train in Illinois had his dismembered body parts fly off and injure a nearby woman. She later sued his estate, arguing that by being stupid enough to get hit by a train, he was responsible for the injuries she sustained from his flying limbs. This is the grave of Vietnam War veteran Gene Simmers, who dedicated it to the elderly woman he'd killed more than 50 years before he died. In 2016, a man who lost his leg in a motorcycle accident convinced the hospital to let him keep his amputated leg. Weeks later, he invited friends over for tacos, made from slices of his own calf muscle. Everyone who ate it was a consenting adult, and since cannibalism itself isn't illegal in most states, no crime was committed. They described the taste as beefy but chewier. In 2009, a Canadian woman named Karen Sala sued Keanu Reeves for $150,000 a month in child support and $3 million in spousal support, claiming he had fathered her 4 adult children. She alleged that Reeves had used hypnosis and even shape-shifting to disguise himself as her ex-husband before impregnating her. Reeves denied ever meeting her, and a DNA test confirmed he was not the father. Despite Sala's bizarre claims that the DNA test was tampered with, the judge dismissed the case as baseless and a waste of court resources. Reeves later referred to the ordeal as horrible. Anna Ayala famously sued Wendy's after claiming she found a human finger in her bowl of chili, but investigators soon discovered she planted it herself. It was a severed finger she received from a friend who had lost it in a workplace accident. She was later sentenced to 9 years in prison for attempted grand theft. In the 90s, a student named John Leonard tried to claim a Harrier jet that Pepsi jokingly offered in a commercial for 7 million Pepsi points. He legally submitted enough money to buy the points, but Pepsi refused. Leonard sued, but the court ruled that the ad was clearly a joke and dismissed the case, saying no reasonable person would think a military jet was a real offer. Patrice O'Neal was a renowned stand-up comedian known for his sharp, unfiltered style on stage and appearances on Chappelle's Show, Opie and Anthony, and the Comedy Central roasts. He first discovered he had diabetes after a girlfriend told him his urine tasted like birthday cake, prompting him to get tested. The disease slowly wore him down over the years until in October of 2011, he suffered a massive stroke. Just a month later, at 41 years old, he died from complications, with his final television appearance being the roast of Charlie Sheen. When Mount Vesuvius erupted in 79 AD, the heat was so intense it didn't just kill people. It completely warped human remains in ways rarely seen throughout history. In Herculaneum, archaeologists discovered the body of a young man lying face down on a wooden bed whose brain had literally been turned into glass. What you're looking at in this photo is brain tissue that was flash heated to nearly 1,000 degrees before cooling so rapidly it vitrified, leaving behind a shiny glass-like substance. It remains one of the only known cases of a human brain preserved through such a gruesome transformation. In October of 2015, 21-year-old Dutch medical student Sophia Koetsier vanished while on a Ugandan safari after stepping away for a bathroom break just a short distance from her lodge. About 3 weeks after she disappeared, searchers found her belongings in eerie condition. Her purse and one shoe neatly placed on the ground, while the other shoe was never recovered, scraps of her fabric tied to branches like trail markers, and her underwear bizarrely hanging 15 feet high in a tree. No blood, remains, or sign of a struggle were ever found, as authorities quickly wrote it off as a wild animal attack, though experts noted that predators don't hang underwear in trees or arrange items so deliberately. Her mother has spent years fighting the official explanation, describing how it felt like the earth had simply swallowed her up, since not even a single fragment of a bone has ever been recovered. Nearly a decade later, Sophia's disappearance remains one of Africa's most haunting safari mysteries. These disturbing facts will completely shatter your perception of time. Joe Biden was born closer to Abe Lincoln's presidency than to his own. If someone born today were sworn in at age 78, the same age Biden was, they would become president in the year 2106. When the microchip was invented in 1958, Belgium was still displaying people from the Congo in human zoos. T-Rex lived closer in time to humans than to the Stegosaurus. Jack the Ripper was actively murdering people, Van Gogh painted Starry Night, the Eiffel Tower was completed, and Nintendo was founded, all in the year 1889. The 10th U.S. President, John Tyler, who was born in 1790, has grandchildren that are still alive today. The last widow of a Civil War veteran just died in 2020. 17-year-old Helen Jackson married 93-year-old James Bolin in 1936 so that she could claim his military pension after he died. And lastly, there are more slaves today than at any point in the history of the world. This may look like a wholesome family Christmas video, but the truth is actually horrific. In December of 1990, escaped convicts Von Lester Taylor and Edward Deli were on the run in Utah when they stumbled upon the remote mountain cabin of the Teed family just before Christmas. While inside, they used the family's camcorder to record themselves opening presents and playing with their belongings, laughing as if it were their own celebration.
I don't know. How am I supposed to find out?
But when the Teed family suddenly returned home, all hell broke loose. Mother Kay and grandmother Beth Potts were both shot dead, while Father Rolfe was shot in the head, doused with gasoline, and left to die inside the burning cabin. But incredibly, he managed to crawl to a snowmobile and escape through the snow to get help. Taylor and Deli then kidnapped the two daughters, triggering a high-speed chase and a shootout, during which the girls managed to escape unharmed. Taylor was sentenced to death, while Deli received life in prison without parole. In 2006, Ray Rivera vanished after receiving a sudden phone call and rushing out of his Baltimore home. Over a week later, his body was found in a locked conference room at the Belvedere Hotel, having somehow crashed through the roof from above. The hole he fell through was bizarrely placed, far too distant from any ledge to be reached by a typical jump, leading some to believe he may have been thrown off the roof or pushed from a higher level of the building. Even stranger, a cryptic note filled with movie references and secret society names was discovered taped behind his computer. The eerie case still remains officially unsolved. Just recently, paranormal investigator Dan Rivera was found dead in his hotel room while on the Devils on the Run tour in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Best known for touring with the infamous Annabelle doll from The Conjuring, the 54-year-old had spent years investigating haunted locations and was a prominent figure in the New England Society for Psychic Research. His sudden death with no signs of foul play has fueled eerie speculation, given his close proximity to one of the world's most notorious possessed objects. As of now, the cause of death remains unknown, as Rivera's mysterious end has only deepened the legend surrounding Annabelle. Danny Masterson, best known for playing Stephen Hyde on That 70s Show, lived a double life that ended in one of Hollywood's darkest scandals. In 2023, he was convicted of raping 2 women in the early 2000s, crimes he had long denied while reportedly using his fame and influence in the Church of Scientology to silence his victims. The women testified that the church pressured them not to report him and even tried to discredit them when they did. Masterson was ultimately sentenced to 30 years to life in prison, a staggering downfall for a sitcom star once seen as a laid-back cultural icon. Jeremy Renner's 15,000-pound snowplow crushed his body with such force that he later recalled hearing the crunching of his own bones. The actor sustained 38 broken bones, a collapsed lung, severe cranial trauma, and required extensive reconstruction with metal plates to his chest, legs, and face. Among the most horrifying details he later revealed was that the impact had dislodged his left eyeball so severely that he could see it sticking out of his head with his right eye. A poor spider that was posthumously named Lawrence got stuck in this glass and couldn't climb up the smooth surface, so it apparently tried to web its way to the top until its silk ran out and it eventually perished. In 2003, 28-year-old British marine biologist Kirsty Brown was snorkeling off the coast of Antarctica when a massive leopard seal lunged from below, clamping onto her head. The powerful predator dragged her deep underwater, then repeatedly surged up and down through the water column in a torturous manner, shaking her violently before releasing her lifeless body. It was the first recorded fatal leopard seal attack on a human. Photographer Sam Davis captured the incredible moment a snake eel burst out from a heron's stomach while the bird was still flying, having chewed its way through the heron's throat using its pointed tail. Both animals were likely fatally injured. In February of 2021, a 45-year-old man named Thangula Satish died in India after his rooster, armed with a 3-inch blade for an illegal cockfight, slashed his groin as it tried to escape, severing a major artery. The rooster was briefly detained at a police station for potential evidence before being transferred to a farm. According to David Bowie's ex-wife Angela, she once walked in on David and Mick Jagger naked in bed together after a long night of partying. Angela took it as clear evidence of a sexual encounter, though neither Bowie nor Jagger ever confirmed it. Jagger dismissed the rumor as rubbish, while Bowie avoided commenting on it altogether. In the late 1800s, long before the invention of discrete vibrators, early models were massive mechanical contraptions powered by steam, hand cranks, or foot pedals. These devices were used by doctors to treat what was then diagnosed as female hysteria, a vague and outdated condition believed to cause anxiety, irritability, and sexual frustration. Rock Bitch, a provocative all-women British rock band infamous for their wildly sexualized live shows, had a notorious ritual during their concerts. They'd hurl a golden condom into the crowd, and whoever caught it, regardless of gender, was chosen to join them backstage for a night of uninhibited sexual escapades with the band. A 2003 study found that roughly 1 in 200 men globally share a nearly identical Y chromosome, all tracing back to one common male ancestor who lived about 800 years ago in the Mongol Empire region. The researchers linked this genetic legacy to Genghis Khan, giving the timing, geography, and his notorious reputation for spreading his seed like wildfire across his vast empire. In 2023, 6 Mississippi cops who called themselves the Goon Squad stormed into a home without a warrant after a neighbor complained about 2 black men staying with a white woman. What followed was hours of torture straight out of a nightmare. The officers tased the men, forced them to strip, and poured milk, alcohol, and chocolate syrup over their bodies while taunting them with racial slurs. They made them crawl on the floor, threatened to sexually assault them, and even forced them to shower together at gunpoint. The ordeal finally ended after one officer shoved a gun into Michael Jenkins' mouth and pulled the trigger, shattering his jaw but somehow not killing him. To cover it up, the squad planted drugs and filed false reports, but the truth eventually came out and all 6 were sentenced to decades in prison. While filming the season 4 It's Always Sunny episode, The Gang Solves the Gas Crisis, Caitlin Olsen was accidentally waterboarded by Danny DeVito for real. The crew thought a piece of wetsuit material over her face would protect her, but water still seeped through, leaving her genuinely choking and gasping for air in a true torture simulation. To make matters worse, Olsen had just recently broken her back after being dropped onto concrete during a 4th of July accident, and she filmed the scene strapped to a board with her weight pressing against the healing injury. She now calls it one of the 3 worst days of her life. In 2023, 38-year-old Christina Murray from Savannah, Georgia underwent IVF hoping to finally become a mother, only to face one of the most devastating mix-ups in IVF history. After giving birth in December, she was stunned when her newborn son's features didn't match the white sperm donor she had chosen. A DNA test later revealed the unthinkable. The embryo wasn't hers at all. For 5 months, she breastfed, nurtured, and bonded with the baby until a court ruled she had to surrender him to his biological parents. Now separated from the child she carried and cared for, Murray is suing the clinic responsible, describing the ordeal as a nightmare that robbed her both of her dream of motherhood and the son she thought was hers. She waited 63 years for the love of her life to return home. In 1950, U.S. Army Sergeant Joseph Gant went missing during the Korean War, and his wife Clara was told only that he may have been taken prisoner. Refusing to give up hope, she never remarried and kept a light burning on her porch for more than 6 decades, telling everyone she was still waiting for Joe. Finally, in 2013, his remains were identified and returned to Los Angeles in a flag-draped coffin. At 94 years old, Clara stood weeping as she welcomed him home, her lifelong vigil ending in both heartbreak and closure. This was the last photo taken of 31-year-old Landre Sylvester in July of 2021, as he walked out of Cook County Jail after posting bail, unaware it would be his final steps. Just minutes after his release, multiple gunmen leaped from 2 cars and opened fire in a calculated ambush, riddling his body with up to 64 bullets in front of stunned witnesses. Police noted Sylvester's ties to local gangs, and many believe the hit was gang-related retaliation, but with no arrests ever made, the case remains officially unsolved. On July 17, 2025, Felix Baumgartner, the daredevil who once broke the sound barrier by jumping from the edge of space, was killed in a tragic paragliding crash in Italy at the age of 56. While piloting a motorized paraglider near a seaside resort, he reportedly may have suffered a cardiac event mid-air, causing the craft to spiral out of control before slamming into the hotel's pool area. The impact killed him instantly and injured a hotel worker with flying debris, sending her to the hospital with neck trauma, but she appears to be okay. Witnesses described a terrifying boom as the glider hit, followed by screams from stunned vacationers. Paramedics arrived quickly but were unable to revive him, and guests at the hotel were left stunned as rescue workers covered his body with a tarp near the wreckage. Hours before the fatal crash, he posted an Instagram story with the caption, "Too much wind," his eerie final message before the legendary thrill-seeker met a brutal end while doing what he loved. This was the final photo taken of newlyweds Samantha Miller and Eric Hutchinson as they left their Folly Beach wedding in April of 2023. Moments later, their golf cart was struck by drunk driver Jamie Komorowski, who was going nearly 3 times the speed limit. Samantha, still in her wedding dress, was killed instantly, while Eric survived with devastating injuries. The following year, Eric reached an $863,000 settlement with the bars that overserved the driver, while Komorowski was sentenced to 25 years in prison for causing the awful incident. In 2017, British hairdresser Daryl Rowe was convicted of deliberately infecting 5 men with HIV. He would meet his victims through dating apps before sleeping with them, after which he would send them taunting messages telling them he lied about being HIV negative. Rowe ended up being sentenced to life imprisonment for his evil actions. In 1966, an 18-year-old man entered a beauty school in Arizona before shooting 7 people inside, killing 5 of them, including a toddler. When questioned about his motive, he said he simply did it to get his name out there. Doctor and philanthropist Patch Adams only agreed to the 1999 film about his life because the producers promised to help build his hospital. But none of the profits from the film were ever given to his foundation, and Adams himself said he hated the movie and everything it stood for. In 1955, a pregnant woman was scheduled for a C-section in Morocco, but she fled the hospital after watching another woman die during the procedure. She was in pain for a few days afterwards, but when the pain suddenly disappeared, she simply went on with her life. 46 years later, she was diagnosed with a tumor that turned out to be the calcified baby still inside of her. A 23-year-old college student from Taiwan was forced to have both of his legs amputated after suffering severe frostbite that his doctor couldn't believe was real. He claimed it was the result of being stuck outside after a bad motorcycle accident, but the truth was he'd stuck his legs in dry ice for more than 10 hours while trying to pull off a massive insurance fraud scheme. His friend and accomplice tied him to the chair, so he had no choice but to endure the excruciating ice burns. Instead of the $1.7 million payout they were hoping for, both of the young men were sent to prison for insurance fraud. This photo of Samantha Koenig was taken by serial killer Israel Keys to convince the victim's family that she was still alive, so that he could demand $30,000 in ransom from them for her safe return. But in reality, Koenig had already been dead for several weeks, and Keyes had sewn her eyes open using fishing line. The family paid some of the ransom before the killer dumped Samantha's body in a lake and never contacted them again.